You have heard us say repeatedly how Juliet stacks up against Cricut and Silhouette, but it's time to test these attributes and find out, is this just a gimmick, or does the Juliet really make that much of a difference? In this video, we are going to test the Juliet, Cricut 4, and Silhouette 5 in 3 major categories: speed, print and cut accuracy, and precision. And as an added bonus, we are also going to compare the noise level of each machine. But before we get started, make sure that you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you can always stay up to date on all things Siser. And with that, let's get started. With the cut started, we set up a timer so that we can get an idea of how fast each machine can complete an identical cut file, both in size and position. Secondly, we use smart material in all 3 machines just to keep the test fair. One other note is that all 3 machines are cutting with their standard HTV settings to also get a gauge of how easily a new user can start without needing to make any adjustments. And just like that, the results are in. Juliet cut the fastest with a cut time of 3 minutes and 24 seconds. Cricut followed close behind with a cut time of 4 minutes and 14 seconds. And finally, Silhouette had the longest cut time, coming in at just over 7 minutes. Now let's get back to the video. After testing, all 3 cutters held their own, but Juliet came out on top with a solid 9 out of 10 with no issues during the cutting process. Looks like so far, the Juliet held up really well. You can see the full design, all the cavities are there. I don't have any spots where there's missing pieces, so everything cut really well on the Juliet. Cricut followed with an 8 out of 10. So I'm noticing right now, just right off the rip, there's a couple spots where it looks like the actual cut wasn't complete all the way. Not that it didn't cut through the material, but what it seems like is the physical shape itself started and didn't end in the same place. Okay, so all in all, this is what our design looks like. So we've only lost 1 piece in the Cricut design. Again, I will say that that could be also user error. I'm not gonna totally say that that's wrong, but I will say that there's some pieces that are kind of lifting, and also that could be material specific. But I am seeing that there's some spots in the design itself where, again, it started the shape, but it didn't complete the shape, which caused some of the actual weeding itself, more tearing and more ripping of the material as we got through the weeding process. So, Silhouette scored a 5 out of 10, which led to multiple issues like misaligned cuts due to an unclear setup guide, and with some cuts not making it all the way through the material in some areas at all, which we can chalk up as a total loss of our design and wasted material. Already, before I even get into a lot of the weeding, I'm already have a piece that completely stuck to itself. So it didn't even cut the whole portion of that piece of the design out. Looks like we lost another piece because it didn't cut all the way through, and then we're missing actually part of a flower because it didn't even cut into the material. For this next test, we are going to send the same design that gets progressively smaller with each section to see how each machine can handle intricate cutting. Now that the results are in, we can see that Juliet crushed it with a perfect 10 out of 10 with every detail weeding cleanly. Cricut did really well too, scoring a 9.5 out of 10, though we saw a few tiny pieces get stuck in some of the smaller cavities. Now we noticed that in the inside cavities of the smaller text that some shapes seem to not cut at all or all the way through around the given path, making weeding more difficult, which means I spent more time weeding and less time creating. Now, Silhouette had the toughest time with the fine details, earning an 8 out of 10 overall. The outside contours of our designs weeded well. However, as we got to the smaller inside cavities of even our 1/2 inch text, I started to notice more resistance while weeding, which was an indicator to me that the cuts were not all the way complete. Okay, now that we have tested the speed and precision of each machine, there is still one big test that we need to do. Let's find out how well all 3 machines stack up with a print and cut file. We set up the same file, maximizing the print and cut space that is available to you in each software to give you an idea of how much waste, if any, each of these machines produce. All right, so the next one is print and cut. This is a big one for a lot, and I actually kept the sheet that we print then cut on here so that we could just kind of weed it off all together and see exactly what kind of results we get. Now, I'm gonna be fair to all these cuts, and I'm gonna start weeding on the rounded edges of my design. And this is actually, we're using Siser's Easy Color DTV, which is a heat transfer material that works in a standard desktop printer. And so it is a thinner material to work with. So it definitely is going to show if there are any pieces of this design that aren't registered properly or any white spaces. It's really going to show those well. Now, being that it's on the mat, let's go ahead and take it off the mat. And we can get some really nice close-up shots of seeing all the edges around. I mean, there is zero white space around my design at all. So this actually cut perfectly to the color edge, gave me a really, really nice look. So we're gonna set this one to the side too, because we're gonna also compare the size and how much of the material you can actually use when you're doing a print and cut with Easy Color DTV on all three machines. All right, next up, we are going to look at Cricut's print and cut. So again, keeping this just on the mat so we can weed it directly on the mat. Let's give it a good old little peel. Honest Abe peel, we're peeling it live for you. Looks like all of the pieces are staying down. And seemingly on the mat, this looks pretty decent. Looks like a decent cut. But when we actually go to take this off of the mat, what we're gonna notice in this, now again, all of these machines have been pre-calibrated. And one thing that the Cricut does well is it actually forces you to calibrate the system right when you open up the box. So, in my mind, there should be no reason why there's any of that white space, because we're also not adding a bleed to any of our designs either. So we're not faking this. It is right to the edge of the color of the material. As you can see with the Cricut though, I do see a very fine line, which is an indicator to me that what ended up happening, because I'm seeing the white focused on the top side of the design, and I'm not seeing it on the bottom side of the design, is that this, in fact, even though it was pre-calibrated, brand new out of the box, still has either an offset issue or has some type of calibration problem. So we might want to go back to the drawing board, recalibrate the machine. Again, we've opened the box once, we've calibrated twice now, recalibrate the machine to see if we can get a better cut, ultimately. So, moving on. Alrighty, so next up is going to be print and cut with Silhouette. As far as the actual design itself, one thing that I did notice is that I was also limited even a little bit more from the Cricut on the Silhouette material. So even when we're talking about which one ranks, before we even get into the weeding of this one, it seems as if the Juliet will allow you the largest amount of cuttable area, or the largest margin. Cricut seems like it will allow you the second largest out of these three brands, and Silhouette seems to give you the least. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually go ahead and peel this one off. Again, I'm using the standard cut settings as I'm doing on all systems, and already, before I even get started, I can see right here that I'm having some issues with my cutting again from the Silhouette. So I'm gonna peel this still, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently as it's starting to peel my material up. And the problem with the DTV is that once it's off that carrier, unless it's ready to transfer, it won't stick back down because it's a static carrier. So there's a very important distinction when we're talking about print and cut and we're using a material that has a static carrier, is that we cannot have any point in time that material lift off, or we basically lose that part of our design if it's an individual element. Now, if it's a full printable or full printable image, then obviously we can do a couple of things to save it. So let's go ahead and peel. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna peel actually from all of the like sharp points, which would typically be the portions of this design that would cause the material to lift or shift in any way. So let me make sure we just take it real easy around some of these. And I can already hear the popping, which also again is that indicator that it didn't cut all the way through the material. And you can see that actually right here, that it didn't cut all the way through. So we're just gonna slowly peel and try to peel that off. There we go. And then I'm gonna go around the edges again, and we'll be able to take that off. So there we go. So now we have our image. Now again, in a perfect setting, this is still a savable image, because with DTV, as you guys know from previous videos, I can rip this off and apply this all in one. However, the real golden test is, let's go ahead and put this up against the darker wood grain table. And this is really gonna start to reveal some of the issues with the calibration of the Silhouette itself. So you can see that again, we're having a massive shift upwards in this design, where I see a ton of white space at the top portions of this design, but also remember we had this one hang up here in the actual feathers of the head. And that can cause a huge, huge issue, because this right here, I would either have to take a X-Acto knife, a pair of scissors, but ultimately it's just adding more and more time to my production and causing me to have to do even more work just to be able to accomplish this. All right, so one thing that I noticed right when we started doing the print and cut testing is the size difference between each individual software, okay? So this is a really good depiction out on the table. I think is awesome to show you. Right now we have the Juliet and Leonardo Design Studio, we have Cricut Design Space and the Cricut Explorer 4, and then we also have Silhouette Studio and the Silhouette Cameo 5 indicated right here. But you can already see right from the jump how much usable printable space the Juliet has, how much that reduction starts with the Cricut, and then even more so how much that's reduced with the Silhouette and utilizing their different softwares. Doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, because for you at home, you may be okay with the limitation, but for some people that are running a business, maybe you're creating stickers, maybe you're mass producing designs, it's really, really important to be able to utilize all of the space that you're creating. I mean, as an example, per sheet, Easy Color DTV is $1.70. Well, if I'm able to use a full $1.70 worth of material, I'm a happy camper. But if I'm trying to maximize my design and I'm losing even a percentage of that, I'm also losing parts of that margin. I'm losing that revenue for myself, and I'm not able to make as much because I'm wasting more material, which is wasting money for myself. And then it gets even worse as we talk about things like color profiling and color management, and the way each of these softwares treat that color management, by some physically using the print drivers and then by others using their own kind of back-end color management system. Not to say that any of these do or don't, most of them are using your print driver, but there's even, not including the size, but kind of going back on the overhead, you can even see a small distinction in the color, the way that each of these softwares manage the color, where it's much more vibrant on the Juliet. It seems very vibrant on the Silhouette, and then the Cricut seems to be the dullest of the three. So that goes to show you, even if you get a little bit more cutting space between the Cricut and the Silhouette, it doesn't mean that your prints are coming out as vivid. And all of these were printed out on an Epson ET 3830 EcoTank printer. Each of them were cut on standard vivid for the color profile. So we kept everything exactly the same. All of these tests, all of the sizes and everything have been identical in this, and it's a pretty remarkable difference in all three of these systems. When it comes to print and cut, the size of the printable area really makes a difference, especially when you're cutting things like stickers or designs for larger garments. Seeing the prints side by side, it's clear that the Juliet gives you the most usable space. In fact, based on the results of our own tests, Juliet had a much larger printable area at 18% larger than that of Cricut and 23% larger than Silhouette, which you can see by the side-by-side comparison. That means that you'll need to use more material to get the same output on Cricut and Silhouette. And remember, accuracy matters too, especially in a production setting. Taking into account the amount of usable space and overall precision, Juliet scored a solid 9 out of 10. Cricut scored a 7 out of 10, and Silhouette struggled a bit more with a 5 out of 10. We ran the same cut file on all three machines while recording their audio output. Juliet was the quietest cutter with an average loudness of 3.8 decibels. Cricut was actually the loudest machine, coming in at 11.2 decibels, and Silhouette sat somewhere in between with an average loudness of 7 decibels. First up was Juliet, then Cricut, and finally, Silhouette. Now that we have tested all major categories that really make a cutting machine, we've concluded that the Juliet is really the most well-rounded machine with an average score of 9.33 out of 10. With Cricut coming in second with an average score of 8.17 out of 10, which left Silhouette as the third best with an average score of a 6 out of 10, but that's not all. When it comes to a new user, all three machines have a startup guide, with the Cricut Design Space being the most user-friendly for someone brand new, walking you through each step of the initial setup process. Now, Silhouette offers some new user content, but it's a little bit harder to find, whereas Juliet has in-software tutorials as well as a YouTube library to get you started. Well, regardless of your next machine, we're happy to give you an honest look at Cricut, Silhouette, and Juliet. Now, if you want to know more about any of these machines, just drop us a comment down below or reach out to us at info@siserna.com today to learn more. And until next time, bye everyone.